Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. And if you joined for the first time, this is part of our industry series for which we meet every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. We pick one vendor or the solution that we review independently. For today, we have a very interesting solution. It's called Sage 300. Some people may remember it as Accpac solution. Typically, it is installed in the construction and real estate. That's where it is very famous. So we are going to have a lot of fun discussing that. Before we do that, we are going to start with everybody's intros. I am going to start with my intro. If you don't know me, I am Sam Gupta, your host and principal at Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm. On that note, I am going to move to Phil for his intro.
Hi, everybody. Phil Coerper, Managing Director for Ringling Business Solutions. We help executive leadership teams align their digital transformation investments with their core business strategies and accelerate and win what they're doing. And I'm coming to you with several decades of work in the C-suite with a lot of implementations of ERP, and looking forward to a great show tonight, Sam.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Phil. Dave, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Thanks, Sam. Hey, everybody. My name is Dave Chrysler, and I own an operations consulting business working with leaders in manufacturing to help them create the systems needed to achieve operational excellence. And I come to you with more than 20 years of operations, leadership, and management experience. So excited to join the conversation. Thanks, Sam.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Dave. Andy, can I ask you to introduce yourself next?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sam. My name's Andy Pratico. I've been in the ERP business for manufacturing companies for most of my career. And I've worked all over North America, and I've helped hundreds, certainly maybe thousands of manufacturers in my career. And in fact, I've written a book that helps helps companies evaluate and uncover the truth about ERP systems. Thank you so much, Sam.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for being here, Andy. And if you are in the audience and joined for the first time, make sure you guys send your questions and comments. Our panelists typically review your comments during the show. We try to cover them. And if we cannot get to them, then our panelists will make sure that you receive your answers. On that note, I am going to start with a little brief about today's solution, and I'll give you a little recap about the Sage as well. And I don't remember, guys. I don't know how many sessions we have done so far on Sage. My understanding is that we have done the vendor review that was one, and then I don't know if we have done Sage X3 or Sage Intech, one of those at least. Phil, do you remember? Intech? Okay.
I don't believe we've done X3. I don't think so.
Okay, so that may be in the pipeline. So I'll give you at least the overall positioning of where Sage is and how Sage 300 fits in the value chain. So a couple of pointers overall from the Sage perspective, as we have done the review. Sage likes to target accounting firms. That's their bread and butter always. That's their primary target market. Obviously, they are trying to reach to the other companies, but their goal always is going to be to please the accountants. That's how they penetrate the market. That's how their product strategy and go-to-market strategy is structured. And we have seen across the spectrum of their products that they seem to have very deep accounting flavor, similar to your SAP, or if you look at Syspro, that has very deep accounting flavor as well. So any of the products that you are going to review from Sage, they are going to have very deep accounting in general, the way their products are architected, the way they are flavored. Sage also has had a lot of different products. In fact, they had one product for every increment of 50, I guess. They had Sage 50, Sage 100, Sage 200, Sage 300, Sage 500. Okay. So I think they have figured out that they had to align their strategy. So I don't know how many products are going to be in the cloud world. Not many. Number one, obviously, Sage X3 is going to be there because that is their flagship product. The second one that is definitely going to be there is going to be your Sage Intacct, because that is the cloud native product that they have acquired to compete with the newer breed of cloud native vendors. Now, Sage 50 is sort of their lead generation tool in my mind, the way I like to look at it, because obviously that competes with your likes of QuickBooks. So Sage 50 may be there. But then when we look at their overall positioning, the only thing we see in their positioning is probably going to be Sage 200 Cloud, especially if you look at their cloud journey, the way their customer journeys are structured on the website.
So
So
I think Sage 50 used to be called Simply Accounting at one time,
yeah,
didn't it?
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
You're right. You're right. So every solution that they had, they also had names for that. I think Sage 300 is called Accpac. 500 was called MAS 500, MAS 500, and then Sage 50. You already mentioned that Simply Accounting. I don't know if they had the other names for the other solutions.
Yeah, Peachtree was another one.
Yes. I don't know which one was that. Do you remember, Andy? Which one
I
was
think
that?
it was 100s. Yeah.
I think you are right.
And by the way, according to your agenda, I think we did X3 back in April.
Did we really?
It says here April 19th. I'm not sure if we changed that date or not, but
Maybe we did. I mean, that's what I mean. We have done a lot, so now it's
Yeah.
very hard to keep up.
anyways, just FYI.
Okay, thank you, Andy, for that comment. So now, when we look at the cloud journey, we don't really find the references of 300 at least. Okay, so you are not going to find when you look at the overall customer journey on Sage's website. That is not to say that they are not going to continue with this product. Sage 300 was especially very strong in the CRE vertical. In fact, I mean, the only product that they had for the CRE vertical they like to position was Accpac solution. Okay, it was really strong. It was targeted there. So from the strategy perspective, it had similar strategy as we had reviewed for Microsoft SL last week. That Microsoft SL, nobody really knows about it because it's positioned for a very specific industry. Now, what Sage is trying to
Sam, for those who don't know what CRE stands for, you might want to describe the acronym.
do you want to take that, Andy?
I don't have a clue. No, I'm kidding.
you know a lot, man. Come on.
Basically, it's construction.
Construction and real estate is what is CRE.
And real estate, yeah.
So thank you, Andy, for clarifying that. Really helpful. Okay, so Sage 300 was always positioned for that vertical. Sage Intacct is trying to bring the functionality inside Sage Intacct, but I don't know how strong that functionality is as of today. Yes, they are targeting the construction and the real estate vertical, but right now it is not going to be as strong as your Sage 300 or the Accpac solution overall from the maturity of the solution perspective for the industry. Sage 300, I don't know if it is going to be re-architected for cloud. Based on the screens that they have, it looks decent. It's not too bad, but I don't know whether it has been re-architected or not. So I will pause there for any commentary or the research that you guys might want to share.
I'll give you a little tidbit of history. As you mentioned, Sam, Sage 300 used to be called Accpac in the old days. And that was a software company located in Vancouver, actually, Vancouver, yep. BC. And they had an amazing marketing strategy where they had training and learning of the Accpac product to be all part of the CA and CPA certifications. So, of course, once the CA or CPA or the professional accountant came out of their certification programs, they already knew Accpac.
Yep.
So guess what? It exploded and it was incredibly popular.
Yeah, completely agree. In fact, I mean, Sage, that's how Sage likes to target the market. A lot of other companies do that as well. You have SAP as part of curriculum too. That's how SAP became so popular. So obviously, ERP companies are trying to get into either the universities or in the accounting community. And that's a great marketing strategy. So Sage definitely is there. All right, guys. So if you guys don't have any other comments, Dave, Phil, do you guys have anything to add?
Well, it's just going to give a little market information that I found comparing X3 to 300, and they're pretty similar in size. The data I found online is Sage X3 has about 3,800 customers, and Sage 300 has about 2,400 customers. And of those 2,400, 1,200 in the U.S. and 562 on this sheet in Canada. So relatively focused on North America. And also, I agree with what you said on the accounting piece, and then some depth in that vertical. I've seen Sage 300 used in other places, but the limitations definitely show up if you get too far out of their lane, in my experience.
So, Phil, I think I may need to clarify the numbers there a little bit, and we have a slide where we have numbers for Sage 300, and
Yep.
I want to be careful with the numbers. So my understanding is that they have roughly 40,000 installations. Okay, 40. And I believe on that, and the reason for that is because Sage 300 competitor was actually Microsoft GP, and Microsoft GP and Business One. Okay, my understanding of Business One from the show that we have done, SAP Business One had roughly 70,000 installations. Microsoft GP had roughly 60. Accpac has roughly 40,000 installations. And the reason for that is because these solutions are sold to the SMB businesses as the accounting solution. So their footprint is going to be far larger. Sage X3 number may be accurate, Phil. Okay, that's a very large solution. That's not targeted as accounting. It's not designed for $5-10 million businesses. That's much larger solution in terms of size. Overall, the way the product is architected. So I'm not too sure about the source of the numbers that you are referring to.
I'm looking at it, and thanks for clarifying, because I haven't vetted this. It's a site I've used before. They're also calling it enterprise share. So maybe this 2,400 customers, that maybe they're trying to compare apples to apples in a certain customer group. I also thought that number looked really small to me, which is part of the reason why I brought it up. And that's customers, not installations. But yours is more vetted. Obviously, yours looks like Wikipedia or something, which usually is a little better. So I'm going to go with your numbers for sure, Sam.
Yeah, and sometimes it could be very hard because they might be comparing the enterprise numbers, as you correctly pointed out. So read between the fine lines.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, we'll look at Wikipedia and we'll see. Andy, do you have any commentary there by chance? No? Okay. Dave, you are smiling. I don't know if that is your video that is smiling, or Dave.
He's smiling because I've blown it twice. I didn't remember the X3, and I was wrong on my numbers. So I'm 2 strikes here. A third swing of the bat, you're going to send me home, Sam.
Oh boy, you guys are so funny. All right. Anything else, guys? If not, we will move to
just in the middle of your screen. It's interesting to note that Sage 300 initially ran on Btrieve. That's the database they now call Pervasive SQL.
Yeah, and we have seen, Andy, if I remember correctly, I think there were a lot of different ERP systems that were running. And on that, and by the way, I mean, this was very mainframe as well. But Sage actually did a wonderful job in re-architecting that on the SQL Server, and obviously it is Windows-based. So it is not something like, Accpac or Eclipse, which is completely mainframe in the background. Here we are talking about, re-architected solutions. So obviously this is going to be different. All right, guys. So if you don't have anything else, we are going to be reviewing some of the slides. So here in 2012, I guess Sage renamed Accpac to Sage 300, and they were sort of trying to create the series, and that's why they have done it. But they have gone sort of back and forth with respect to their names. So now I don't think they are using the 300, 500 series. They have gone back now. Sage X3 is called Sage X3, and Intact, I don't think they are going to probably give the number. So they have moved away from their numbering scheme or the marketing. So here, from the history perspective, I think Andy was right that they were very mainframe based, the way they started, but they have re-architected this. And right now, if you look at the database structure, they are definitely MS SQL based. So they are saying since Sage 300 2016, only the Microsoft SQL is supported. So they were actually doing both. They probably had similar strategy as Syspro. Syspro was doing file-based. and then database in a couple of versions, and then they sort of move to the database, because the migration could be very difficult for some of the customers if they don't want to move. I think SAP ran into the same challenge with their SAP Business One. So here, they are talking about just supporting the Microsoft SQL database. Here they are also saying Sage Software acquired Accpac from Computer Associates was the company. I don't have anything else. And I remember the Canadian history. I was looking for that comment. Andy, maybe I have it on the other slide, but they were very penetrated in the Canadian market. I thought I had some reference, because the way they penetrated, you mentioned that they had the training module. That's one aspect, but they also had very specialized Canadian payroll. And sometimes these features could be a huge barrier. And in the construction space, you need the payroll. Otherwise, your ERP is not going to work. So
well, I'll tell you all something kind of interesting from this screen. Halfway down, you'll notice that it was the Windows version marked more to client server, marked the move to client server, and was developed with the all new code in COBOL. Well, here's an interesting fact. COBOL was invented the same year I was born.
Andy. Brilliant comments. They have to be there, part of the show, right? Andy, thank you so much for that. All right, guys. So, I think this is where the numbers are coming from, by the way, Phil. And this is the number. I believe this is taken from Sage's site. They have it listed as part of their site itself. So obviously, I don't think they are going to be that off. So here they are saying all-in-one business management software, and this could be tricky to read. Okay. So now when they say all-in-one business software, my understanding is that this slide is taken from the Sage 300 page. Okay. So now that could be the number for Sage 300, which I'm inclined to believe, to be honest, because of the size of the solution. Okay. But sometimes what companies do is they are probably going to position this number for all of their solutions. So it could be slightly tricky to read.
Or sometimes they mean a number of seats, not the number of customers. They sometimes use seats and customers synonymously to make the number expand.
But I think you caught the flaw in my number earlier, Sam. I think that I went back and looked at that page, and like I said, it's a reputable site, and they were trying to compare X3 as an enterprise solution to Sage 300 in the enterprise space.
Now we have our answer there. And here as well, if you look at this comment, it says over 40,000 customers across 150 countries. By the way, Sage solutions in general are very well localized and globalized. And that's why they are going to be present in a lot of countries. So they are saying in a variety of industries, trust Sage 300 to manage their finances. So obviously they are being very clear and deliberate in saying that this is the number for Sage 300. So we know that it is definitely that. Okay, so now, some of the very unique features that I found on Sage 300, and typically that's what I am looking for, because that's what drives, which industry the solution is going to be fit for, and which are the industries that it really targets, because you are going to have those key details in any software that you are going to go for. You are going to find them to understand, okay, what is the flavor for my software? What is the mindset? What is the psychology? So that's where I like to focus on. So here, if you pay attention, number one, the number of tabs you are going to see on your purchase order screen, there are only going to be 4. So that is your indication that this solution is very small in general in size. If you look at even the mid-market solution, if you are going to look at something like, N4 Cloud Suite Industrial or NetSuite or Acumatica, those are probably going to have 8 to 12 tabs. And it's not that they are trying to increase the number, they have to have them, because it becomes very hard to manage on just one hierarchy. And that's how your hierarchy is structured. If you look at the way the data is sort of structured in the background. So here, the data is going to be far flatter, because the smaller companies probably don't need that detailed hierarchy that you are going to find. Let's say, if you look at unit of measure, the number of, your customer hierarchies can be supported. Typically, in larger solutions, you are going to have far more. So that's where the key differentiator is between the ERP systems. So here, this is definitely for the smaller size customers. And That's probably the reason why it's called Sage 300, because the way their numbers were done, Sage 50, QuickBooks, Sage 100, slightly bigger, Sage 200, slightly bigger. Then Sage 300 is going to be somewhere in between. Okay, Sage 500 is going to be their biggest solution. Then you have Sage X3. So that's how their hierarchy was structured. Traditionally, Sage was very focused on the SMB market. They never wanted to target enterprise market. Okay, if you look at the numbers, and one of the slides I remember, I think 6 years back, okay, nobody knew Sage as the ERP company. When they were talking about ERP companies, they'll always talk about, okay, top 3 or 4 are going to be your SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, maybe in 4. Okay, that's how they used to talk about. But if you look at the SMB market share, Sage was always number 1. SMB market share, okay, in terms of the numbers. But nobody really spoke about Sage as their ERP company. The reason for that is because Sage is perceived as very accounting company. That's how they are positioned in the market. So that's where I think people sort of mistake. But Sage, as of today, has very deep ERP capabilities, and they do really well in certain industries.
I think the Sage 500 system has been more or less replaced, even though Sage 500 was targeted at machine shops and job shops, and Sage X3 is more focused at process. But I think it's not really, Sage 500 isn't really marketed anymore.
I don't think they are going to carry with that, to be honest, because the discrete market is very competitive, as we both know. And the Sage's market was always either construction, real estate, agriculture, food, process industries. That's where Sage was really strong. Okay, so that's why Sage 500 was sort of the misfit. Yes, they are going to target Sage X3 for that right now. If you talk to Sage, they'll position for discrete manufacturing, but the solution is not really designed for that. We both know this.
Well, the other thing was the Sage 500 system always was reliant on third-party accounting systems.
Yep.
So it was kind of the odd one. Which one is different amongst all their products, right?
Exactly. And sometimes it could be very tricky overall the way Sage worked, to be honest. Sage was very weak in general in the CRM functionality. Okay. And, there was a time when they started sort of, positioning Salesforce with their products, because they knew that they will not be able to bring the CRM functionality. In fact, Delta has similar strategy. They are not trying to compete with Salesforce. They are trying to align with Salesforce that, okay, I'm going to be accounting solution. Hey, Salesforce, use us as your partner in your deals. So that's how, Salesforce approached the market. In fact, Andy, there is one more finer detail that I found with a lot of manufacturing customers. So you would find Sage as the accounting solution with a lot of different companies. And then you are going to find Epicor as their MRP. If you look at the traditional, companies, when one ERP could not do it all. So for accounting, you either used SAP, Sage, or QuickBooks, obviously. So these were very accounting focused solution. And then you had the MRP. In fact, let me see all of these companies, whether the ones that are manufacturing focused at this point of time, whether you talk about Epicor, Rootstock, Infor, they were all selling MRP, but then everybody became ERP now. Everybody's trying to compete with each other. Okay, so here, some more commentary. Now, I see some of the fields such as last receipt number. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense, to be honest. I don't know why they would have last receipt number on a PO. So typically, the way receipt process works is, you are going to have a receipt and you have a 1-to-N relationship between your PO and a receipt. Now, there is something going on here that I am not able to figure out why you need to have an extra number for the last receipt, unless receipt means something else. Typically for PO, it's going to be a receipt that you are receiving on a PO based on each of the line. That's how the receipt works. So why do you have last receipt number? Again, this is going to be a limitation, some sort of limitation that they are probably not able to tie the PO and receipt together. That's why you have that. Now, you have some of the dates. In some of the industries, I have seen they use a lot of dates on a PO. And the reason why they would use those many dates is because they don't have the underlying functionality of how your PO lifecycle works. So they have to keep either a lot of different statuses or dates, and it's going to feel very bloated. But again, the limitation is going to be either in their processes or in the data structure. That's why they need to have that. Here they have arrival date, which is not too bad, in my opinion. But again, why would you have on the PO? Maybe that's a promise date. I have seen promise date on the PO as well. So that's very interesting overall in my mind. Now, the only other tabs that I am able to see here is going to be probably Texas. But if you look at the PO functionality, it's very lean in general. Now, the other things that I noticed on the PO tab is going to be, and by the way, this is the item screen for the PO. Okay, so they have the weight unit of measure. Now, if you look at weight, a lot of discrete manufacturing industries are probably not going to have weight. Typically, you are going to find that in food and agricultural business, and you will find a lot of flavor. You look at Sage products, you are going to find the flavor of agriculture and food. And that's why you have the weight unit of measure. You are probably not going to find that even on SAP, because SAP does not like to target that. They don't compete with Sage in the food and agricultural vertical, because Sage is going to be far stronger overall in terms of the expedition management, functionality, weight, catch weight. That's where Sage really shines. And by the way, they have the whole layer for the weight management. They have weight unit of measure, they have unit weight, they have extended weight, just the way your pricing and discount is going to work. So that is just fascinating for me. But if you look at the unit of measure, they don't seem to have at least as many layers for unit of measure that you are going to find on other larger products. For example, let's say if you look at Sage Intacct. Sage Intacct, when we reviewed that, it was very lean product in general as well. Again, it was perceived as more of the accounting solution in my head. I could not see much of the operational functionality when I review, Sage Intacct. So this is similar. Unit of measure is very lean and basic. So obviously, this is going to struggle in the distribution space, in the manufacturing space. This solution is not really designed for that. It's a very construction service-centric solution. It does really well in the real estate and construction, as well as food.
On that right side of that last one, Sam, you did have an expected arrival date. So for whatever reason on that screen, they seem to have a promise date functionality, but not on the last one. I'm not sure why.
Exactly.
But it is there.
So my understanding, Phil, of this is going to be that this is probably going to be at the item level and the line item level. That's probably why, you have the estimated arrival date for each of the item. But then you have the arrival date for the whole PO. So, that probably will translate into the arrival date. I don't know.
I guess that's possible. I'm used to seeing it in both places, but it's on an item level. Maybe that's extra functionality. Actually, if that's being used, obviously, if you're going to use it for demand planning, you need it on the item level. Exactly.
So now the other key point that I missed on this slide is going to be the vendor item number. And typically, when you look at the decent sized distribution software, they are going to have multiple vendors and multiple cross references for the one item. Here, you just have one vendor, so that's going to be a limitation. Again, not designed for distribution. If you are doing, using this as your accounting and you have light distribution, you might utilize that. But again, this is not targeted for distribution. The other thing that I noticed, and I don't know whether you guys have seen this or not before, I have personally not seen anybody doing the shipment entry. Okay, so you either do order entry or you do invoice entry. Let's say if you are not going to go through the sort of the order entry process and you simply want to generate the invoices directly. Okay, but I have personally not seen the shipment entry. So maybe you guys can tell me if you guys have seen. And again, I don't know if they are doing this because of the underlying limitations of the data model, or maybe in some industries you might have to do that. And this, the way I read this, it almost seems like that they might not have transfer order, and shipment entry may be used for the transfer order functionality as well, because you have the ship to location code. And my assumption of the ship to location code is going to be this is probably your internal warehouse that you are trying to ship to. So I'll open up the floor and ask your opinion, guys. Have you guys seen shipment entry anywhere? Phil, Dave, Andy.
I'm kind of with you on this one. Maybe it's a transfer order or some sort of cross docking, but typically I don't know why else you'd use that. I mean, you have invoice, you have receipt. So I'm with you on this one. This one's a little confusing to me. So
the only time I've seen something similar was with a different system, and in that particular situation, it was that the shipment process was kind of a siloed process, even though it was like it was, I guess, technically the best way to say it would have been a bolt-on to the actual ERP. And so there was a shipment entry process that had to be completed for that to flow back into the ERP. But that'd be the only thing that I've seen that would be similar to this.
Exactly. And you don't want to have multiple entry. I mean, that's the entire idea of doing the order entry, and that results into your invoice as well as the shipment. So your operations and finance are sort of, running with the same data. But this is really strange for me.
Yeah, in that particular situation, it was a bit of a mess, especially out on the shop floor. A lot of, as you can imagine, right? A lot of back and forth, a lot of changes, a lot of mistakes. So,
yeah. So they have some very interesting piece of functionality. By the way, I mean, this is great, although it is a very small solution in general. Obviously, this is something that everybody's going to love when you look at the visual tracking. And this is very similar to SAP. Obviously, SAP was very sophisticated the way they did. This is sort of the baby version of the visual tracking, but any of the finance solution that you're going to have that are going to be really complex in finance, you probably require the visual tracking. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to trace and debug and monitor your cost. That's why probably they have these visual workflow for your financial processes. Okay, so one of the things, and again, this is my assessment, and I always like to vet my own ideas as well, and hopefully they are not biased. So my perception of Sage product is always going to be they are very friendly to accountants and accounting and finance people. Okay, so here they have a process, and this is something I have not seen in a lot of ERP systems. It's called provisional posting. Okay, the way provisional posting works is, so it's almost like you're trying an error before you send an email. You can test whether you can send an email or not. Okay, so that's how this particular process works. So here, it's actually going to mimic the whole process, whether you can do the GL entry or not, and you can look at the errors before you actually make an error. Okay, so when you are going to be in very audit-centric industries, that's where these things are going to be really handy. And the reason why these things are handy is because, your auditors are going to be asking a million questions if you do any incorrect entry, even if that mistake was genuine. Sometimes to explain that could take, let's say, 2 days, 5 days, 7 days, and that's a waste of time for everybody. So that's why the accounting systems actually, especially the ones that are going to be targeted towards the audit-centric industries or publicly listed, companies, they are going to have far deeper functionality for CFOs as well as for the accountants. Have you guys seen that before? Provisional posting?
Well, I'm trying to make sure I understand it, Sam. I have not seen this as a GL, but I've seen it as a transaction. I've seen the enterprise systems commonly that you can decide to save and then post, or you can decide to test and then post, and it'll tell you what the errors are. So if I'm trying to do an inventory transaction, I can run it and it'll tell me if there's any errors before I actually post it. But I've never seen it called GL provisional posting. So that's why I'm not sure I'm understanding what the functionality may be.
And I want to make sure we are clear here. So there are two things, I guess. A lot of systems, what they do is they will make something like unposted, and after that, the only thing you need to do is approve. So typically, the reason why that functionality exists is, you are going to have data entry people who are going to be doing a lot of data entry, and typically your accountants are simply going to review and going to release. Okay, so that's why you have the unposted and posted process and a lot of different systems. My assumption is going to be, I think I have seen this in the enterprise systems because they probably would require this, but this is like running a real batch. So when you are posting a GL batch, let's say if you are going to have any sort of errors. So here in this particular case, they are saying period 6 in fiscal year 2020 is logged. So you'll not be able to post it. If you try to post, then you might leave some traces there. So right now, don't post it, fix these errors first, and then do the actual posting so that you are not impacting that whole audit workflow and you are not leaving any traces that will require explanation later. So that is the intent of this functionality. Here it also says that cannot post to an inactive account. In this particular case, the person is trying to make a mistake and system is trying to warn that, okay, these are the problem, fix this before you decide to post. Phil, are you with me
Yeah,
on this?
that sounds right. I'm still not completely sure I got my head around the functionality here. No system's going to let you post to an inactive account, right? So I mean, you know, you're going to get an error whether you try to post it, or you're going to get an error to whether you provisional post it. I'm not completely clear. If it's a batch, then maybe that gets me closer to an answer on that, on why this would be useful.
So, Phil, I can see where you are with this, to be honest. And you are absolutely right that if the account is going to be logged, then obviously you'll not be able to post it. Where this is going to be handy is, let's say you try to post and you sort of, half of the thing of that batch worked, but half of the thing failed. Then if you have to reverse the whole batch, it becomes very hard to reverse, right? So that's where this is going to be handy, that, okay, you have some problems, don't try to post it. If you post, you might run into the data integrity issues or inconsistent behavior. So don't post it right now.
I can see that being useful if you're batch posting. I can definitely see that now.
Dave, you want
No, I was just going to add to that. I mean, considering it's for the SMB market, it could be, Phil, too, that, it's, I hate to say it, but a bit of a marketing spin from a kind of error proofing logic standpoint. In a typical enterprise system, you're going to have accountants and people that understand, the batch process, reversing the batch, catching errors, things like that. This could be something to kind of walk people, non-necessarily, accountants that are handling these transactions kind of into that, a non-CFO role, perhaps, to kind of walk somebody through, what does this look like? What are we going to do with this? I mean, where you would traditionally hear it probably presented in a different light, maybe with an enterprise system.
Okay, amazing insight there, Dave. If you guys have anything else, we can cover those, or we can move to the next one. So here, this is going to be a very thick field service centric functionality. And we have seen field service functionality in a lot of different systems, especially if they are going to be targeted for construction. So this is, I don't know if this is going to be add-on. My understanding is that this is slightly different system than your real CRE component, but it integrates really well with your Sage 300. And this has very deep field service functionality in general. Especially for these verticals. So here you are going to find very deep flavors of cost codes. And sometimes people don't understand how construction is different. They might be able to say that, you have retainage, you have, you have to do sort of the cost basis billing, but they can't really explain that, the cost codes, the foundational element of your ERP systems are going to be very different as well. So if you try to use any sort of manufacturing system for construction, good luck with that. It's probably not going to work, because the way your cost codes, the way you do your timesheet and reporting, the way you are going to be doing your reporting for unions, it's very different in the case of construction. And again, this is one of the best construction system out there, even though it is not going to be as large. But in general, the construction companies are either going to be smaller or they are not going to be as operationally complex. And that's why, systems such as Deltek or Sage 300 can run very large companies as well. This is your union functionality, and this needs to be inbuilt as part of your ERP system. If it is not built, you are going to struggle a lot. Okay, this is literally a layer, the way your transactions are going to be reported. The way you report in your manufacturing transaction, here you are trying to report your construction transactions. And if you don't have those union layers and the payroll supported as part of your ERP system, it might be fun. Overall from the integration perspective. So make sure that is inbuilt as part of your ERP system. And this is why this is really strong with the construction as well as for real estate.
Yeah, we've seen this type of functionality in a couple other packages, but this really looks great.
Yeah, I agree. So now, again,
Sam, how would you compare the payroll capability that's built into a third party like ADP or Ceridian or one of those?
So in my experience, I think that the handshake, the integration is where the real trick is in general. Okay. So when you talk about running payroll for a manufacturing company, if you are not going to have any sort of unionized labor, then your computation of the payroll is not going to be as complex. But if you are going to have more variables and the variables are going to be from your shop floor, that's where the real trick becomes in doing the payroll. Because think of this as more of the sales commission. Sales commission becomes very complex when you are going to get the percentage of, especially if you are doing very, very, very complex sales comp. That, okay, I am going to be comping you when I get my invoice. I'm going to be comping you when I create my shipment. I'm going to be comping you. So, you could make very simple sales commission, or you could make very complex sales commission. The same way your payroll works as well. Sometimes it is going to be mandated by government, so you don't have a choice there. Okay. So that's where the depth is overall when you look at the overall handshake, how embedded your payroll functionality is going to be as part of your operational transactions.
Yeah, I think that's right, Sam. This remember, on the ERP, you're connecting to bids, you're connecting to compliance.
Yeah.
You're connecting to how you invoice against those bids. So if there's certain assumptions on how much union labor you're going to use, or which one's there. You also might have reporting to unions themselves that are required. Then your handshake to your payroll is paying the check and making sure the taxes are right. And I don't see that functionality in this particular platform. I think you're still going external, Andy, to actually do your payroll functionality, is the way I'm thinking about it. Sam, does that sound correct?
So Sage is going to have Sage Payroll that is probably going to be integrated as part of your 300. So they have very different functionality for 300 CRE solution. And the reason why they haven't integrated in this particular case is because construction requires it. In fact, Accpac has done the same thing. They never wanted to do the payroll functionality, but if you look at their construction module, they are going to have the payroll integrated, provided by Accpac as part of the solution.
Interesting. That's helpful, because that's not been my experience with other packages, even the ones that had some payroll functionality like the union screen. There was still value in having a third party like ADP or someone actually do the payroll and connect it to the time clocks and the other things that they provide, and the taxation they provide. So and the portals they provide, so your employees can go manage certain functionality too.
Yeah, and by the way, on that point, I think the portals that these guys are going to have are going to be very different as well, because in this particular case, you are not just collaborating with your vendors, you are collaborating with your subcons. Okay, and the whole collaboration is going to be very thick in general. Okay, the way you are going to have vendor collaboration in your manufacturing, in your process-centric industries, here you are collaborating with your GCs, you are collaborating with your architects, you are also collaborating with your subcons. And each step of the process, you are probably going to be doing some sort of split. So that whole handshake is very difficult as well. And that's what makes construction extremely challenging overall. And that's why you have things like, job estimates, RFI, work centers, production units. If you have any sort of, weather issues, sometimes there could be cost impact because of that. So you are going to have all those things. You are going to have incidents. You are going to have insurance claims. So again, it becomes very, very, very thick and deep, the way the costing and tracking is done in the construction business. That's why you have all of this functionality that you are not going to find in vanilla ERP. Now, there are some other flavors, the way the collaboration works. So, for example, let's say if you're collaborating with your GCs, you are going to be doing a little bit of drawing as part of your specification, and that needs to be part of your workflow. If it is not that, sometimes that could become very challenging when you are doing the submittals, transmittals, and there is a whole thick process there. Most companies that I know of probably are going to use something like Procover for their operational management of construction, and they typically use something like Sage 300 for their accounting piece. But Procore and Sage 300 as well as Sage Intacct, they are really married together. Okay, Sage understood that, what, there's no way I can be the whole operational piece, because Procore makes it really easy, and Procore has become very large enterprise-centric solution the way Salesforce is, and that's why Sage is trying to align themselves with Procore a lot. And and that's why, let's say if you are a slightly bigger organization, then Procore and Sage 300 is probably going to be your ideal bet, if you're in the construction and real estate market. So I don't see anything else that we can cover here. The reading unit of measure is very unique as well, that you are not going to find in the other solutions. So they have that because they need to capture the equipment reading, and based on that, your billing is going to be who is using, who is renting, who is the owner. So there is a little complexity there. Then we have the compliance management for subcontractor. That's a big deal. You have a lot of lawsuit. So obviously you need to make sure that subcontractors are going to be insured. There are obviously casualties on the site as well. So somebody needs to take care of that. So typically that falls under the responsibilities of the operations manager, and Dave knows about it. You know how that goes. It's not fun at all. Okay, so these are some of the things from the project setup perspective, and that's very unique as well. The way your costing is going to be, for example, the way the commitments are going to be in this industry are going to be very different. If you look at some of the inventory commitments or the manufacturing commitments, those are very different from how construction is going to be treating them. So it's a very unique functionality for construction. And again, your submittal and transmittal process is actually embedded as part of your the whole project management. Then retainage is a big deal. It's just beast, okay, the way it works. It's a very unique financial workflow. If your system does not support it, you are going to struggle a lot. So make sure you have that if you are in the construction business.
That's more or less a showstopper.
Exactly. And some of the manufacturing companies that are selling in construction, for them as well, it could be a showstopper, because the way their billing works could be very different. You can't simply take a workaround that, okay, I'm going to treat this amount as retainage and I'm going to accounting in this account in my chart of accounts. Typically, the functionality is slightly deeper than you would think.
And the way this screen is structured, it's really well put together.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, guys. Okay. Then we are going to be looking at some of the things. And again, the whole accounting gets very deep when you look at the cost tracking of each of the element of your project. So if you are running an IT project or marketing or legal project.
This is built into Sage 300?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why it does really well in the construction and real estate world. It's really designed for that.
So you really got an interesting tell here, guys. Look at the original margin, 9.13%. Pending change orders, 86. Approved change orders, 68%.
Yep.
Total with approval, 9. Just in case you wonder where the contractor's making their money.
Yep. And and you are talking very construction specific problem right now, Phil. The way
100%, because you're low bidding it and you're making it up on the changes, and that's not a secret. I mean, that is the way life rolls.
Yep. Okay. So now here we are talking about very deep document management functionality as well. And you are going to have very thick stages from the document management perspective as well. Some people may argue that, you know what, if you have some sort of enterprise document management, that might be okay. Even with this, you might be able to build some of the custom statuses. But again, these are very different statuses. In fact, companies don't actually like Sage 300 for the submittal and transmittal process. Typically, they are going to require something like Procore. And Procore has 5 or 6 different competitors that are really strong in that operational functionality. In the collaboration, submittal, transmittal, they are really, really strong there. So even they are not going to be happy with this functionality. Most of the estimation managers, the construction project managers, they just don't like it. Now, this is where, and again, the whole submittal piece gets very interesting as well. And this is going to be a collaboration when you are doing the collaboration with your architects, with GC, subcons. So that whole collaboration piece is very, very, very deep. It's almost like they are part of the same company. That's how deeply they collaborate, but that's not true, right? Because they all have their own books and an accounting system. Now, some people may, even the activity reporting, the way activity reporting is going to be, manufacturing activity reporting and construction activity reporting is very, very different overall, the way that works. So again, construction is a very different beast in general. Okay, some reviews before we open up for the commentary. So here, this is the comment here. The user is saying Sage 300 Accounting Accpac is one of the simplest accounting platform to use out there. And the reason why you are feeling it is simple is because it is smaller in size. It is not going to be as restrictive as some of the larger solutions. So again, the size matters. If you are small, use a small, you will find it's easy, simple. But once you grow, then you probably will require slightly more complicated solution. Then it also says that after 20 concurrent users, and Phil, now, this is where the comment is going to be overall based on the size. So it says that after 20 concurrent users, cost of ownership becomes pricey. To get enterprise level controls and process flow, you must purchase third-party add-ons. So the reason, why Sage has priced this way is because obviously they don't want to make lower than anybody else. But let's say if they are selling to $5 million companies, the deal is going to be far cheaper. But once you get to SAP level, they are probably going to be charging the same. So companies are going to be choosing Sage 300 because number one, it's going to be cheaper for these smaller companies. Or if you are going to be either in the agriculture or you are going to be in construction real estate space, then you will be choosing this because it's going to feel far natural. But let's say if you are in any other patches, there is not really a rationale why you would choose this solution.
Yeah, that's a big one to try to understand the future, because once you're on 300, and if it gets pricey, it might be pricier than some other solutions that you might desire, but it's a full implementation to change it, even within the Sage family. Changing from one to another.
Pricey is a relative adjective, right?
That's true too. That's true. That's a very good point too. So that, we don't know if that's competitive or not. It's just more than this customer expected. It's a great point.
Exactly, guys. So some more comments here. So here, this is the management consulting business, which is probably okay. So here, this person is saying basic accounting in AP cannot add second default GL account code in vendor setup. Can you guys believe this? Okay. So these are going to be the nuances where the layered hierarchy is going to be limited. Okay. These are the details that matter for your ERP implementation. So again, these are the basics that are going to be different. So I'm super shocked with that comment there. And I could see a lot of limitations overall. But you are probably going to require this when you are going to be in slightly more distribution-centric industries. But maybe you don't need that for construction real estate.
It goes back to the size of company that the product's targeting, though, too, because if you look at the score this guy is giving it, it's 9 out of 10. Yet there's some limitations that seem rather basic. So his expectations are not that high.
Yeah, and I very rarely care for the score. That's not what I just don't see it. So here, I have one more comment here. AR invoicing is to field size in the description limited to field size in the description. Client have asked for more detail. And by the way, this guy is a consultant probably for other industries. So that's why he's saying clients have asked for more details in certain cases. Context helps. Is not very detailed. Documentation, I think I've seen a lot of different problems because of that. Some more. So this is the Duke Reality Corporation. This is the right fit. In this particular case, they have 200 to 500 employees, and they are saying track job cost at a detailed level. They're going to appreciate that. Pay our construction vendors, going to appreciate that. Bill our customers, going to appreciate that. Now, they lag behind in project management features such as RFI, and the reason why they are finding it shocking is because they would use something like Procore for that, not ProShop, sorry, for that piece, and then they'll appreciate that. Some more. So here, the user has actually commented that says 300 ERP with Procore, and this is the construction company 11 to 50. Even that small company requires Procore. So you can imagine, how complex the construction gets. So here they are saying seamless transfer of commitment updates. Now, commitment is a very thick functionality in general. And when that flows from your operational to your ERP system, that becomes the seamless process. And that's what they are appreciating, because Sage 300 is very well integrated with your Procore. Then they are saying integration of budget modifications between Procore and Sage. And again, the budget modifications that Phil was talking about, modifications and those change orders, that's a nightmare. So you don't want to eat up all of your cost or margins, because of your admin effort.
Yeah, but Sam, that negative comment says allowing owner change orders to update Sage. So it doesn't sound like the change order portion is a part of that, just the
at least not part of the integration.
Budget, yeah, just the budget modifications.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation right there. Yeah. So I believe and I don't know, you guys probably can chime in a little bit more there in terms of what would be, my understanding is going to be that change order functionality is going to be there between your ERP and Procore. That's my understanding based on the data flows that I have seen. But either user is off or something is going on here that I don't know what is happening here. Sorry, Dave.
Yeah, it could be a user issue as well. Unclear, just based on a little bit of a description there.
Exactly. All right, guys. So I'm actually going to open up for the commentary from you guys.
Well, the product itself has been around forever. It was probably, I'm not sure when Computer Associates first designed it or released it, but I bet you it was in the 80s. And, they've had a very strong following and an excellent reputation. The biggest challenge that I always find with these types of systems is the quality of the integration to third-party built add-ons or bolt-ons. And, not always you're going to have that, like that one comment Dave made, you're not always going to have those clean integration points at everywhere that you'd hoped or expect.
Yeah, I like the fact that they know their lane, and sorry, David, I like the fact they know their lane. They seem to stay in their lane. They really added functionality, real deep functionality in the key parts. So I like that. I think that gives them a spot. It'll be interesting to see if indeed they're going to sunset this, how they go about repeating that type of depth of functionality in some of their other products. I think that's got to be pretty challenging. And then I'm a little surprised at a few of the comments on the financial package, because what I'm used to in Sage is they grew up as a finance module, and they're usually really good there. So I was surprised a little bit. Like you explained it as it's a skinnier, smaller product, but I mean, multiple addresses on an AR account or something, having a second default GL. I mean, those are not, you don't need to be that deep in order to have that, especially if you're known for finance. So I don't know if that was maybe some misunderstanding, but I thought that was the surprise.
And sometimes, these opinions are directly relational to that person's experience, and it might not be correct.
Might not be correct, or they just didn't ask the right person the right question, or
right, exactly.
They ran out of money with the SI.
Yeah. So that would blow your top, right?
Some of that too, Phil. I mean, no, it's okay. All I was going to add to that was, some of that could be a carryover from, kind of that, the legacy journey, really. And to me, I know we didn't really talk about it tonight, but, we have in other reviews. And, as you really look at those detailed screenshots, you can see the difference of where the technology lives. I mean, you can see the kind of, outdated, if you will, UI with the kind of, back from the 90s data records, kind of forward and backwards versus, some of the more web-based, UI screens that you're going to see kind of later in the presentation. So I think to me, it speaks to all of that. And I agree, Phil, it'd be interesting to see, how does that move forward? It's to me, the challenge that everybody has with these solutions is how do you move this forward, continuing to develop and duplicate the existing functionality.
And when you get used to that UI, I mean, the users become very proficient, because I've worked with companies that have this product and they get very proficient, but it's you don't have the multiple functionality in common screens thing. You're always going to a screen to do something very specific, and then you're jumping somewhere else to do something very specific.
Yeah. Well,
and if someone's used to a cloud-based system and they go to this, they're going to not be happy. Yeah. But if they're used to this, they're going to say, okay, well, you've seen these users work. I mean, they're just flying around doing it. They've been doing it forever.
100%. But what ends up happening, like I was going to point it out in, I think the PO screen, and I know you've seen this before, probably everybody has, but, with the availability to maybe not add some additional descriptions or things like that, there's a comment field in there, right? So what ends up happening from a user perspective, they end up figuring out how to make it work. And then, you lose that visibility, you lose that data in the system. It's too difficult to pull out and to, really do anything with. So again, to your point, Phil, yeah, they're great at, figuring stuff out and keeping things moving and being used to it. But it's that, kind of change piece. And then where does that information ultimately go that, had the solution maybe evolved to that next level, there'd be some additional visibility across the business.
All right, guys. Any more short comments? Anybody?
Yeah, we had one comment, just commenting a little bit about union and what would be caused if someone went from a union shop to non a union shop. But I think actually in that particular case, this software, regardless of if you were evolving or not, probably gives you a pretty good solution. So that was the one comment that we had. So
yeah, I agree. Anything else, guys? Dave, Andy? All right, guys. So that's it for today. So obviously, if you are a small to medium-sized business in the construction, real estate verticals, and maybe in food, this is probably going to be not food. I want to be careful there. Agriculture. Okay, food is probably not the right fit. So agriculture, this is probably going to be a great fit. So make sure you are going to be including this as part of your evaluation if you are in those patches. On that note, that's it for today. If you joined for the first time, this was part of our industry series for which we meet every Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern, and we always review one vendor or the solution. So make sure you guys are going to be here next week. We are going to come back with another solution. On that note, thanks everyone for your time and insight tonight.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Sam.
Everybody.